Now, time for our long interview. During a political career stretching almost 4 decades, Dennis Canavan has remained a colourful and staunchly independent character. A former school teacher, he served as Labour MP for West Stirlingshire and then Falkirk West for 26 years, during which he was unafraid to oppose his own party's policies where they conflicted his own deeply held socialist beliefs. A final breakup with his own party saw Canavan stand as an independent MSP, and he was finally expelled from Labour. Retiring from party politics in 2007, Mr Canavan backed the SNP candidate for Falkirk in the 2010 general election, a portent of his role as chair of the Yes campaign in the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. In this week's long interview, Gordon Brewer, who for the sake of complete transparency was one of Dennis's former pupils, discussed his life and work, and he begins by asking Dennis Canavan how he came to support Scottish independence.
I can't remember any Damascene point of conversion. It came more as a process of evolution rather than a sudden flash of light. But you're right, Gordon, that I was a convert, perhaps a belated convert to the cause of independence. And my conversion to the cause was based not on any emotional factor. It was based on my experience, mainly my parliamentary experience. You know, I'd spent, about a quarter of a century or so at Westminster, most of that time in opposition. And I could see at first hand that it was very difficult during these years for us to be delivering anything meaningful for the people of Scotland. There was a huge democratic deficit, you know, and the Thatcher government was forcing through legislation which had no support from the people of Scotland, little support from the elected representatives of the people of Scotland, and yet the Thatcher government was able to force things through against their will. Probably the worst example of that is the poll tax, which was probably the most evil tax that had ever been invented, and the people of Scotland
was it after you left Holyrood that you became wholly converted?
Yes, because my experience in Holyrood, albeit for 8 years, I saw that in Holyrood there was a parliament which, not perfect. No parliament is. You know, it consists of human beings, and human beings sometimes make mistakes, and there were some mistakes made in the early days of the Scottish Parliament. But I saw that over the course of these 8 years in the Scottish Parliament, that the Scottish Parliament was responding far more constructively, far more positively to the wishes and the demands and the aspirations of the people of Scotland, whereas Westminster, to my mind, was completely ignoring the wishes of the people of Scotland.
Now, you emerged from retirement, effectively, to chair that campaign.
Yeah.
You lost. Do you think the lessons of why the Yes campaign lost have been learned by pro-Yes politicians in Scotland?
Well, I think we're still learning. And, you know, I look back on that campaign. Remember, it was a long campaign from 2012 to 2014. And at the start of that campaign, most of the polls were putting independence at just under 30% support. Whereas by the time polling day came round, we had got that up to 45%. Not enough, but nevertheless a good base on which to build victory the next time round.
But do you think there was any different approach the campaign could have taken that might have got you over the line the first time?
Yes, and I think that we ought to be honest enough and humble enough to admit that mistakes were made. I mean, the currency thing, for example, turned out to be disastrous. I mean, you cannot have a currency union with another partner unless the other partner agrees to that currency union. So it was a hostage to fortune. It was giving our opponents, our unionist opponents, a veto over the policy. So that was a mistake. I think that lessons have been learned now, that we've got to come up with a better currency option, and I'm glad to see that support is growing and seems to be accepted now within members of the Scottish government, that the idea of an independent currency in
Yes,
Scotland,
I think what they're saying now
yeah.
is perhaps within the first, within a term, a parliamentary term of Scotland becoming independent, they would do that. Now, recently you've been saying you think Nicola Sturgeon should seize the initiative and call another referendum. Is that your view?
Well, my view for some time now has been that we should try to have a second referendum on Scottish independence within the lifetime of the current Scottish Parliament, bearing in mind that the present Scottish Parliament has got an overall majority of MSPs elected, taking into account the SNP members and the Scottish Green Party members. There is a majority for independence within the Scottish Parliament, so we could argue that we have a parliamentary mandate for Indy Ref 2, which is letting the people decide whether there should be an independent Scotland.
So
are you
Nicola Sturgeon's argument is that she'll make her position on another referendum clear when Brexit becomes a bit clearer, and that it would not be sensible to do. And clearly, one suspects the SNP have learned the lessons of what happened a couple of years ago when they, boosted the idea of another referendum. Then they did extremely well in the last general election, but not as well as they'd done in the one before. I mean, do you think her argument has some merit?
Yes, and I can understand why she's being cautious, and she's got a difficult job because, there are some people in her own party who would like a referendum maybe next week or next month or whatever, and I think that is possibly being a bit unrealistic, and I think that Nicola is probably wise to see how things go.
So
with the
another referendum,
Brexit.
but not now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Brexit? We'll talk about that later. It's possible it might not even happen.
I'm saying not in the immediate future, but certainly
before 2021.
Certainly before 2021. Yes.
Should the mandate stay, which of course was based on the idea that Britain would leave the European Union when the people of Scotland voted to stay in the European Union?
Yes, the people of Scotland, I think it was over 60% voted to remain in the European Union. And remember that during the 2014 referendum campaign, we were told that if we voted for independence, then we'd get kicked out of the European Union against our will, as it were. And now we're being kicked out because of Brexit. Well, we're in danger of being kicked out because of Brexit.
If there is another referendum on independence, would you be up for playing a role again?
Well, I have already said publicly that I am willing to play a full part in whatever role I'm asked to play. I'm 76 years old now, but I'm still pretty fit, and I think that I'll be ready to...
Ready to chair it,
ready to get up and go. And as I say, in whatever role I'm asked to play, it may very well be that they're looking for somebody else in leading positions the next time, but we shall see.
Now, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. I know that's pretty dangerous at the moment. We can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow. But do you think Scotland will be independent, say, within the next 10 years?
I think that Scotland will be independent within my lifetime. And I am 76 years old now. And as I say, I'm fighting fit. I've been blessed with a good life.
Well, I was going to say, but without calling you actuary, I'm not quite sure what that... But you think it will happen?
Yes.
Now, the Labour Party. I want you to explain something first, actually, to us about the Labour Party, because I was very struck by a passage in your autobiography where you talk about the night that you won. Just to explain to people, Labour refused to select you as a candidate for the Scottish Parliament, and you stood as Dennis Canavan MP and won the seat with, I think, the biggest majority in Scotland. And you write about the night that result was declared, when effectively you clobbered the Labour Party. And you say, I think the phrase you used was, you should have been the happiest guy in Scotland, you say. Mm-hmm. And you say you weren't because part of you was feeling, I wish I was still part of Labour. And you write how people outside the Labour Party can't understand that because it's a family. And you had been deprived of that. It's a difficult thing for people outside to understand.
It is, and I had mixed emotions. I was obviously elated at being elected, or rather I saw it as a re-election, because I had been a parliamentary representative for more than a quarter of a century. So it was continuing as a parliamentary representative, as it were, albeit in a different forum within the Scottish Parliament. But why did I feel a touch of sadness on that great night? Well, remember this, Gordon, I had been virtually born and brought up in the Labour Party. My late grandfather was a founding member of the first branch of the Labour Party in the county of Fife. And my father was active in the Labour Party, a trade unionist and so on. And in Cowdenbeath, where I was born and brought up, the Labour Party was like the natural party of local government. The only opposition that the Labour Party had in a place like Cowdenbeath was, in fact, the Communist Party. So I felt that the Labour Party that I had been born and brought up in had been captured by this guy called Blair, who came from nowhere and be Prime Minister.
But I wonder, I'm just wanted to get to this idea of family, because I know you don't like Tony Blair, I know you profoundly disagreed with him, but Labour as a party has also changed. And I wonder if that's really entirely to do with the Labour Party or as much to do with the way society has changed. I mean, your descriptions of Cowdenbeath, it wasn't just that Labour was the natural party for people to support there, was it? There were all sorts of organic links between people and the party through the cooperative movement, through trade unions, through social clubs that would be run by the Labour Party, miners' welfare clubs. All of that seems to have... I mean, I just wonder, has it completely eroded? It possibly has in Scotland, given what happened to Labour over the last few years. Maybe it's a bit still there in the north of England?
There may be bits and pieces of that loyalty to the Labour Party left, but in Scotland, even in the mining or former mining communities, when I was going round the country during the independence referendum campaign, I found that many of these people, the sons and daughters of miners, and indeed some retired miners themselves, were voting yes to independence because they saw, as I saw, that there was a much better chance of an independent Scotland delivering the kind of policies that they wanted to see, you know, on basic things like equality of educational opportunity, a free, accessible national health service, housing for all instead of the homelessness that people are suffering just now. Simple, basic things like that people wanted, and they felt that the New Labour project had deserted them. The Labour Party had virtually lost its soul. And in an independent Scotland, it would be a fresh opportunity to deliver the kind of policies that they would like to see.
Of independence? I mean,
yes.
If we go back to a great Scottish socialist, John Maclean, his view was, I think, aligned with what you're saying. It was an instrumental view. The argument was, look, if Scotland becomes independent, it would be easier to set a progressive agenda in Scotland than it would be if Scotland was part of the UK.
Indeed.
Rather than give me my soul fire so I can drape myself in it.
Indeed. I mean, I see independence not as an end in itself, but as a means towards building a better Scotland, a fairer Scotland, yes, and I think a more prosperous Scotland too, and most importantly, as an internationalist, a Scotland that will play its full part in the international community, thereby helping to build a better world.
Now, let me read you a sentence from your book. You say, nowadays, when I am asked whether I shall ever join the Labour Party, I usually reply, never say never, but I would have to see a radical change in direction. But there has been a radical change in direction. The Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party is unrecognisable from the Labour Party you've just referred to under Tony Blair.
That quote, I think, was written about 10 years ago. And you're right that there has been a significant change in the direction of the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And I agree with a lot of what Jeremy believes in. And if I were living in Islington North, I would probably have voted for Jeremy at the last general election. But I don't live in Islington North. I live in Scotland, and I don't think that Jeremy gets Scotland. I don't think that he understands Scotland, and I certainly don't think that he sees, as I see, that the best chance of delivering a left-of-centre agenda is in an independent Scotland. I can't see. I honestly, much as I admire certain aspects of Jeremy Corbyn's policies, and I first met Jeremy Corbyn about 20 or 30 years ago, I honestly do not see him as a future Prime Minister. And I think over this Brexit nonsense, I think that he seems to be
whether or not he becomes Prime Minister.
To Theresa May now.
But Labour is a credible force. I mean, it claims now to be the biggest mass membership party in the whole of Europe.
Well, if you're asking me, is it a party of potential government? I don't think so.
Really?
I think that there's a big difference between getting committed left-wing activists to support your party and getting that message across to a broader mass of people. And Jeremy has a huge job to try to do that. I wish him luck if he can do it. But
so you're not considering rejoining?
No. When Scotland becomes independent, it may very well be that there will be a realignment of parties, and there may then be a Scottish Labour Party emerges which is independent as well as a radical left of centre and an agenda which will appeal to the people of Scotland. And in these circumstances, you know, if I saw that there was a chance of a Scottish Labour Party which was going to be a potential government in an independent Scotland, then I might be persuaded to think again. But at this stage, no, I wouldn't entertain the thought of rejoining the Labour Party.
Now, so what would you say to... I mean, you talked earlier about going around during the independence referendum campaign, talking to people, and they were saying they thought independence was the best way to get a range of things that they wanted, basically a left-of-centre agenda. Now, I'm sure there must be some people, I don't know how many, but what would you say to them, some of those same people who might say to you, well, look, oh, come on, Dennis, independence, that was 5 years ago now. Here's this, look at the Labour Party, they've got a new agenda, they're radical, they've got a lot of young people joining them. That's the way to go.
Well, I still do not see Labour at this stage having the potential to form a government at Westminster. And I think that the best they could hope for would be getting into some kind of coalition arrangement, and that would probably lead to a dilution of the policies, a lot of the policies that Jeremy Corbyn believes in. Take, for example, Trident. I mean, Jeremy himself believes, as I believe, that Trident and indeed all nuclear weapons should be done away with. But he's not in control of his own agenda in that respect because his party south of the border wants to hang on to Trident, or at least they don't want to give it up. I feel that he's not, therefore, in control of what he would like to do himself.
Now, you talk in your book about how after, and we should again just remind people that after you became an MSP and you'd won, you'd been expelled from the Labour Party during that process, but you were still a member of Parliament in the House of Commons, and you describe how Labour desperately tried to get you to rejoin the Labour Party, having refused to make you a candidate because you say they were terrified of having a by-election. Given that, I'm just wondering what you make of Scottish Labour now. I mean, what do you make of... I mean, again, it's changed, hasn't it? I mean, Richard Leonard is a different... Whatever you think of him, is a different kind of leader and with different politics than Scottish Labour's had for a while.
Yes, and again, I wish Richard well in trying to pursue a democratic socialist agenda, but I think he's got a huge job to do in trying to convert people to that cause at this stage. And I think, too, he's not seen to be in charge of his own agenda. I think it was one of his predecessors, I think it was Joanne Lamont, that described the Scottish Labour Party as just a branch, a sub-office of the UK Labour Party. And I think that Richard ought to show more independence of mind and independence of leadership if he's going to make a success of being a future First Minister.
Now, as well as all the political success you've had, I mean, you've also had a life which has been full of great personal tragedy, haven't you? You've lost 4 children, something which many people would find very difficult to imagine. Has that strengthened you in a way, do you think? It must have been immensely difficult to cope with.
If you'd asked me that question just a couple of years ago, I probably have been in a position to say, yes, it perhaps has strengthened my character in some respects, but that was before the death of my only daughter.
Yes.
The 4th child I've lost. And I find it difficult to speak about it, but the death of a child is... Well, it's the worst thing that can happen to any mum or dad. You know, any bereavement in a family especially is a sad thing, but it's against the whole natural cycle of life for a child to die before you. And in my case, it has happened not just once or twice, 3 times, but 4 times, and I still find it very, very difficult to comprehend. I still waking up in the middle of the night sometimes asking myself, is this true? Or has it just been a bad dream? But very sadly, it's not a dream, it is reality. And I've just got to face up to it. I do suffer from terrible, indescribable bouts of depression at times, but
yes,
I just got to struggle on.
Strengthened? I was never sure how religious you were. Has it strengthened your religious faith or called you to question it?
I think it's probably strengthened it because faith is a strange thing, and you know, I respect people who have different beliefs or disbeliefs, but I know that in my case, that if I didn't believe in God and in a life hereafter, then I think my depression would be even worse. That I take some consolation for the fact that I believe that my 4 deceased children are in God's company. That they're not absolutely dead in every respect. The spirit lives on.
Look, on a much lighter subject, you've tried to be an inspiration, not just as a politician, but in sport, haven't you? It's been one of the things that you've pioneered and championed. You were president of the Ramblers Association of Scotland?
Yes, that's right, the Ramblers Scotland, yes.
And you ran a marathon in under 3 hours. I don't know how many, but
that
you did
was a wee
one.
while ago. Yes.
But do you think that's important as a, you know, let's forget politics for a moment, but is that a message you think perhaps young people should get more? I mean, a lot of them do a lot of exercise and a lot of being fit, or maybe even older people should be getting out there and doing things.
Yes, I've always believed in physical exercise, and I find that even nowadays, I mean, I can't do the same physical exercise as I used to be doing, not with the same intensity anyway. But you know, I think I would find it very difficult to run another marathon, for example.
Well, in under 3 hours, don't do yourself down. You might do it in 4.
But I still find that sometimes when I'm feeling very, very low, that I find that if I do some exercise, whether it's walking or swimming or getting out on my bike or whatever, that it does make me feel better. And I found that sometimes too, that when I was in Parliament, that sometimes there is great pressure upon individual members of Parliament. Sometimes you feel as if the pressure's getting on top of you, and you wonder, is this problem really soluble in any meaningful way? And at that time, I used to sometimes go out for a long run, maybe 10, 15 miles or something like that. And by the time I finished, I had this flow of adrenaline going, and I felt that, the problem wasn't quite as huge as what it had seemed at the start of the run.
Well, there's a tip. All MPs should be running down the Thames to Southend and back at the moment, given what's going on.
Indeed, yeah. But I would strongly recommend physical exercise and sport, whether it's individual sport or team competitive sport or whatever. I certainly, over my life, have found great enjoyment out of it, and I think, too, that it has helped me to survive.
Now, one of the things about you that I think is important to you, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're not just a professional politician. You're not one of these people who went to university, got a job as a special advisor to someone and worked their way up. You were a school teacher. We should have full disclosure at this point. You are the only person I've ever interviewed who was my teacher at school. You were a very good math teacher, at least till it came to me. But anyway, has the fact you were a teacher and you had, I know it's a cliche, but life experience before you entered Parliament, do you think that's important?
Yes, I think it is. Whatever one's life experience is, whether it's in a profession or whether it's in business or whether it's working down a coal mine or whatever, I think it's very, very important for people who are members of a parliament to have had some experience of life outside Parliament. And ideally, too, Parliament should be like a microcosm of the society that it represents, where you've got
But do you think it's decreasingly that?
Yes. When I think back, I was first elected in 1974, and you had people who came in, literally, some of them from the coal face. People like Dennis Skinner, although I think he's the only one left, but at that time there would probably be a group of at least 20 or 30 former miners. You'd also have former engineers, you'd have former bus drivers and train drivers and labourers, and you also had the professions. You'd have lawyers and doctors and teachers, and that was within the Parliamentary Labour Party alone.
What you just said reminds me, it's interesting, we've got a theme going here, because it's the same as what we were talking about, links between Labour and communities. These organic relationships. In other words, I suppose if you wanted to be highfalutin about it, that politics is not just about politicians, but is about civil society and the merging between the two, that perhaps is being snipped link by link.
Absolutely. And I think that Parliament has been less representative in many ways over the years, of the less representative of the people. The one exception I could think of is when it comes to gender balance. There is a much better gender balance now. When I think back in 1974, there were very few women members of Parliament, very few in the Parliamentary Labour Party. The gender balance now is still got a long way to go for equality between men and women, but I think it's substantially better than what it was all these years ago.
Now, let's finish with Brexit. And look, we don't know what's going to happen by this afternoon, let's face it. So let's not get into the details of it. But I'm just interested, if you put your eminent former parliamentarian, well, you wouldn't like a hat, would you? Bunnet on. I mean, if you were there now, do you think MPs are behaving well?
No, not particularly. There's a lack of leadership. There's a lack of leadership on the part of the Prime Minister. And I'm sorry to say that, but I don't see great leadership coming from Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party on this matter of Brexit. Let me put my cards on the table. I voted for Remain, and I was very pleased that the majority of the people of Scotland agreed with me. But again, we can see this divergence of opinion now between, just on this Brexit stuff, between the majority view in Scotland compared with the majority view south of the border. And I think there's no easy answer, but I have thought for some time now that the case for a second referendum on Brexit is getting stronger by the day. And I think that will probably come about.
We're going to end on a very unfair note, because I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. Do you think Brexit will actually happen?
I don't think it will.
Well, go on, don't keep us...
Because I think that there is a good chance of that second referendum becoming a reality. And I think there's a lot of people, including people south of the border, who at the time thought that Brexit was a great idea, but who now see that they were grossly misled by all these messages on the bus about millions of pounds going into the health service instead of going to Brussels, etc., etc. And I think that, OK, I realise that the opponents say the people have decided and that's it. And you're just wanting a rerun of what the people have decided. But the people are entitled to change their mind. And remember, the electorate has changed since the last referendum on Brexit. A lot of the people who voted at that time have sadly passed away. And a lot of young people have come onto the voters' roll. So I really do think that there is a strong, strong case, bearing in mind that when the people decide something, it should be based on information, correct information. The electorate, of course, have the right to decide these matters, but it must be an informed decision. And I do think that next time round people will have better information of what it's all about. And I think that there's a great chance of Brexit not becoming a reality.
OK, Luke, I've gone for half an hour. And I've managed not to say please, sir, once. So I think we'll leave it there. Dennis Canavan, thank you very much indeed.